Hello, this is Jeff Hyman. I'm your host of the Recruit Rockstars podcast. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. My guest today is the CEO of a Chicago-based company called Nerdio, probably the coolest name I've heard in a long time. And Vadim Lemirsky, sorry to screw that up, is the CEO.
That's
and
all right.
Nerdio helps MSPs build and grow their IT practices in Microsoft Azure and also in the private cloud. And fellow alum of Kellogg School, and I've been looking forward to talking with Vadim. So Vadim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Why don't we start with just kind of the 30,000 foot overview of the business itself? What is Nerdio all about? When did you start it and why?
Sure. So Nerdio started about 4.5 years ago, and we are a software company that created a platform that IT service companies, we call them MSPs or managed service providers, use to create a cloud practice, meaning they use that to basically take their customers to the public cloud, specifically Microsoft Azure. So our software makes it quicker and easier and more automated, and we help MSPs kind of do that all day, every day.
And what were they doing before you guys came along?
So most MSPs were and still are doing sort of the traditional IT. They're putting servers in the office. Cloud is sort of becoming a popular way of delivering services, but a lot of small businesses and the MSPs that service them are still doing things in a very traditional way. So, before we came along, people weren't doing a lot of public cloud, at least in the small and mid-sized business market. And the MSPs really struggled with a lot of challenges with growing that practice. So, we came along to help them out with that.
Well, what was the experience that led to this? So tell us a little about your background after school, kind of what was the path that you followed? Was it more on the technical side, more the business side, and what ultimately led to the formation of Nerdio?
Sure. So it's a bit of both. So my background, both educational and kind of interest-wise, is both in technology and computer engineering from McCormick, and then an MBA from Kellogg. And even while still an undergrad, and certainly throughout grad school, I always liked IT. Always liked computers and technology, and always been involved with providing services, IT services to SMBs. So first company I started was actually a managed services provider, an MSP, that serviced a lot of customers in the Chicagoland area. And we built sort of a very unique practice for the time, which was kind of mid-2000s, which was this cloud-based model that was really unheard of back then.
Yeah, that was pretty early for a cloud
Very
model.
much. It was before AWS. It was certainly before Azure. So, I'm dating myself in that a little bit, but it was very unique, and it worked out very well for us. It was very successful. And in the process of building that business, we created a lot of technologies to help ourselves be more efficient as a service provider. And a few years into it, about 10 years into it, we realized that there's other MSPs who are just now trying to do something similar. And we've already figured this out, both from a business process standpoint and from a technology standpoint. So we started Nerdio with a set of technologies to help MSPs build a similar type of a cloud practice.
Got it. So now let's kind of shift over to the people part of the business. Roughly, how big is the business in terms of people, and where are they located?
Sure. So people are fairly distributed. We are at about 40 people today. Half of them or so, maybe a little bit more than half, are in the Chicagoland area. Certainly not, mostly not in the city, but in the suburbs. And the rest of our staff is really all over the place. We have a lot of people in various states throughout the U.S. We have people offshore. So really pretty distributed workforce.
Was that a conscious decision, or did you just kind of fall into it? I'm curious when you conceived the business, did you always intend for it to be distributed?
No, it actually was not a conscious decision. And I think if I had a choice, it would not be such a remote workforce. I'm sure, as you know, better than many, it comes with its own set of challenges.
Yes, it does.
Sort of building that culture and cohesiveness is something that requires an extra effort when you have such a distributed workforce.
Yeah, it seems like you have to work twice as hard to communicate and to ensure clarity and that kind of thing. So The structure of the team I'm envisioning is a lot of engineers.
Yeah, probably half of the organization are engineers building the software and testing the software, and then the rest of it is people doing support and then sales and marketing.
One of the questions I'm asked most often, and you've got unique insight into this because you speak business, you're big shot Kellogg MBA, and you speak technology and development. Developers and engineers are a unique breed. There's no question. They have a very different kind of DNA and wiring. How do you drive communications throughout the organization? What are kind of the communications rituals that get the most out of your developers, let them still be developers, and help them, integrate with the rest of the organization on the business side? What are kind of the strands or connective tissue between the two?
Sure. That's a great question. I mean, I think it all comes with, or all starts with sort of clarity of vision, right? Of what is it that the company is trying to build and accomplish. And then really helping each and every person, especially developers, kind of draw this line of sight from what they're doing day in and day out to sort of this bigger objective, and making sure that that's repeated and that's clearly communicated to them on many occasions over and over again. So that's something that I personally, as the CEO, work pretty hard on, and my executive team, I try to make sure that they have very clear objectives, and they sort of disseminate it down the ranks to their teams to make sure that everyone is really clear on what it is we're trying to achieve as an organization, and everyone understands that on a day-to-day basis, like what they're doing is achieving something very specific. So I think that helps align everyone in terms of at least kind of rowing in the same direction all at the same time. But getting people integrated, requires FaceTime. It requires, whether it's constant video communication, voice communication, or even sort of in-person type of events. We just a week or two ago, we came back from a trip that we took to Cancun, Mexico, that we took the whole company to the trip.
Entire company went to Cancun.
Entire company, yeah. And
now, was this meant to be a communications focused meeting, or was this a celebration or recognition of some sort?
It was really meant to be a culture building event. We've done it twice before, so this is going to be our third time that we've done it. And I think the lasting results from a trip like that are really felt. The very first time we did it, it was sort of to celebrate some milestones. And then once we realized how much clarity and cohesiveness it created between the engineers and the salespeople and the marketing people, right? Everyone sort of got to be friends on a personal level. We decided that this is something that if we can afford to do it, we're going to keep doing it because it creates a lot of value.
It's not cheap to do.
It's not as expensive as one would think, but it's not cheap, certainly.
I'm interested in the hiring process at Nerdio. The name alone must get people interested and kind of curious about the business. It's a great name. What is the key reason that you've realized that they come to work there? You can't pay top of market. There's always someone that can pay more than Nerdio can. So what is your hook? What is the reason that I come work at Nerdio?
So, I mean, I think it sort of comes into multiple components. Number one, people see us as a very sort of leading edge technology company where, we're working on really the latest, hottest technology, solving a business problem that's sort of clearly identifiable in the market. We have an awesome marketing team that makes sure our social media presence and our Glassdoor and LinkedIn and everything is current and nice and spiffy. So that certainly helps get people in the door. Mm-hmm. And my experience has been that, as we've grown and gained more awareness in the market of who we are, it has become significantly easier to hire people. You earlier in our discussion, you asked, if the remote nature of the workforce was an intentional decision, and it wasn't. And the reason we started doing it this way is because it was just easier to find talent in other places. But we're finding that now, being in the Chicagoland area, tech talent is not very easy to attract, but it's becoming easier, right? It's just becoming easier because we have so much visibility in the market and good marketing on about the company. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is, once people come and they talk to their prospective colleagues, I think they obviously ask about what's the culture like, and it's very fast paced, and it's very sort of startup-ish in a sense that everyone is doing lots of different things and running very fast. But I think there's very good camaraderie, and people get along with each other, and I think we do a fairly decent job screening candidates for culture fit. And people are just very friendly, and they're very like-minded.
You mentioned screening for culture fit. How do you articulate the culture of Nerdio? There must be a phrase or a word or something so that you know what you're looking for.
Sure. So, I mean, that really, it changes, so we're a 4-year-old company. And again, I came from an environment where, I built that company for a little bit over 10 years. So there has definitely been an evolution. Today, when we talk to someone, the first thing we try to do is to scare them off. We tell them, hey, we're a startup. We run really fast. Our cycle time is really, really short. So you're going to be expected to do things on a timeline like you've never even imagined you'd have to do. So if that doesn't scare them off, then we start telling them, about the mission of the company and what we're trying to accomplish and what the big picture is. And as far as, the way to articulate the culture, which is obviously a very difficult thing to do, but, I'm going to stay away from the typical, the core values, although we do have those and we do live them, but we don't talk about them much. So I don't know. I guess it's a tough question to really articulate in just a handful of words.
So then how do you know when you found someone who would be a good match? Obviously, if they don't run away after you try to scare them away, right? But beyond that, what else makes you say, wow, this person would really be a great match with the Nerdio way?
Sure. I mean, they really have to be willing to roll up their sleeves and do, be flexible, be dependent, and have sort of a sense of urgency to get the job done. And they also just have to be nice. Now, it's a very difficult thing to assess, right, at an interview stage of, if this person is going to, be a nice person to work with. But, we try to do the best we can. And for the most part, we've been successful at that. So that's sort of how we assess it. We sometimes for certain positions, we obviously look for deep technical expertise and we interview based on skill. But for the most part, the things that we're doing are fairly unique in the market. We're not expecting someone to be able to come in and hit the ground running with the technical knowledge or other sort of knowledge that they need to be successful. We're just looking for someone who's willing to learn, someone who's willing to, go above and beyond what they would sort of initially expect in terms of urgency and pace.
Yeah.
And then just be flexible in what they do.
If you're like most entrepreneurs, you've made your fair share of hiring mistakes over the years, and I don't just mean at Nerdio, but even in your past life. What, you don't have to name names or anything, but what did you look back and realize that you missed, that if you had noticed it or seen it or discovered it or whatever, it would have prevented you from making that hiring mistake? What are kind of the most common things?
Sure. It's a good question, and one that I'll give you a very honest answer to. After every bad hire, you obviously go back and you think, well, what is it that I missed that
Right.
I should try to, and I haven't come up with a pattern. I don't have an answer because it seems to be a different thing every time. So there really isn't a pattern I've identified yet. Maybe I haven't hired enough people yet.
Well, then how long do you give someone before you say, you know what, I think I may have made a mistake? Is there a rule of thumb that you can give listeners that you're like, you know what, after this long, it's a mistake?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the position, certainly, but I guess the short answer is too long, as probably many entrepreneurs out there. I think it's reasonable to know if someone is going to be sort of a cultural fit, probably within 3 months, certainly, right? Maybe 60 days to 90 days. Once they get acclimated to sort of the environment, you can see what their demeanor is and how well they fit with everyone else. So that's one piece of it. From are they able to get their job done perspective, sometimes it can take a little bit longer. Maybe it still could be 60 to 90 days, but sometimes it could be up to 6 months if there's sort of a lot to learn. And then once they've sort of absorbed everything they need to know, can they perform at a level that you would expect them to? So that may take longer.
As the business has scaled, have you had to either redesign the organizational structure or make changes where someone had done an exceptional job up to a point, but could no longer maybe keep up with the pace of the business growth?
Yes, yes, definitely.
And so how do you handle that situation? Because the person's done a great job, right? They're loyal, they're kind, uh, they're competent, but then the business outgrows them. You have, as the CEO, you have to be attentive to the business as a whole. How do you make that trade-off? And then how do you deliver the message?
It's not easy, but I think it's important to be transparent with them. I mean, I think it's important to understand that the job and the position that someone is in really changes with the organization, and they may be phenomenal at what they're doing today, but they should know that as the business changes, they may continue to be phenomenal and grow into it, but they may not. So I think it's just an honest and frank conversation. If there is still a role for them to continue doing what they're doing, which generally there is. Normally, right? It's not that their current position goes away. It's just that now there needs to be a leader above them or a manager above them that you need to fill. And you have an honest conversation. And you say you may just not be ready. Maybe you'll be ready one day, but today this is not something that you're ready for. So
Yeah.
and we've seen it work out both ways. We've seen it where people have left as a result of a conversation like that. Again, and I think it was the right decision for them and the right decision for the company. And we've seen people that have taken that in stride and said, look, I understand. And then eventually they actually ended up growing into that leadership position when people who were hired didn't end up working out.
Have you ever hired someone back who had left the company, uh, or you had asked them to leave the company and for whatever reason they come back?
We've had that on a couple of occasions. It's usually when someone leaves, it's a challenging thing to kind of from a loyalty perspective.
Yeah, there's an emotional piece to it, right?
There's an emotional piece, but we've had, I think, on at least two occasions when someone just came back and said, "Look, I made a terrible mistake. The grass seemed greener on the other side," but I now realize that's not the case. And we have rehired a couple of individuals, and I think they've been here for many years since. So I think they've become much more loyal, knowing what they know, being out there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that, right? Because someone thinks the grass is greener, they go find out it's not, they come back, they're incredibly loyal, and that word spreads to their colleagues that it's not always better on the other side. So, well, I give you a lot of credit for that. Vadim, thank you so much for sharing the story about Nerdio. We really appreciate it. How can people learn more about Nerdio or get in touch?
You can visit our website, which is getnerdio.com. And you can learn a lot more about what we do there. And thank you for having me. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Vadim.